Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Maths Made Easy with Terry in 10 minutes. So we'll be talking about how do you sketch a cubic graph, okay? Please make sure you review previous videos, it's very important, and try as much as possible to, if you have any question, just let me know, send me a message, or my email is on the channel, just send me an email and I'll get back to you. All right, so if you've not subscribed, liked, or shared, I don't know what you're waiting for. And don't forget to click on the notification bell so that when I post new videos, you'll be the first person to know. All right, so before we go into this, there are some concepts I want you to review. Just go to my playlist. I want you to review two things. The first one I want you to review is the concept of X and Y intercept. So I've talked about what do you mean an X intercept, what do you mean a Y intercept. I've talked about that. And I also want you to go and review stationary point. How do you find stationary point? I remember I told you a stationary point, the derivative is equal to 0. dy over dx is equal to 0. So it's important you go to my video under differentiation. Okay, we talked about stationary point and the different forms of stationary point. So please go and have a look. All right, so let's get straight into this. Now, just a reminder, okay, I've talked about this. I know you say, oh, Terry have said this a lot of times. The standard form for a cubic graph or a cubic function is ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d is equal to what? 0. So this is the standard form, all right? So that means you'll be given a function, for instance, 3x squared, 3x cubed plus 5x squared plus 6x minus 7, and you will be told to sketch the graph. Remember, the key here is sketching, not plotting. All right, so we just want to have a rough idea of how the graph will look like. We just want to see a rough idea. It's different from plotting the graph, okay? Now, in order to do this, there are 4 things you need to know, okay? So there are 4 things you need to know in order to what? Sketch a graph. So in order to sketch a graph, there are 4 very important key things to keep in mind. Now, the first one is the stationary point. So the stationary point. So you need to find the stationary points or coordinates. Okay, so in my previous videos, I've talked about stationary point, the concept of finding it, and the steps on how to do it. So I assume you go back, you review the videos of stationary point, and when you've reviewed it, you can come back here and continue. Then you need to know what is going to be the shape of the function based on some information I'm going to talk about very soon. Then after you found the shape, the next thing you need to look for the x-intercept. And then you need to find the what? The y-intercept, okay? And remember I told you at x-intercept, the y is equal to 0, and at y-intercept, the x is equal to 0. So you can go back and review the concept. We've talked about the concept of x-intercept and the concept of y-intercept. So just a quick one, an x-intercept is where the line crosses the x-axis, and the y-intercept is where the line crosses the what? The y-axis. All right, so how do you sketch? Let's go straight to it. There are 6 rules or steps on sketching of a graph. Okay, there are 6 rules or steps in order to sketch a graph. Now, the first thing, I'm going to discuss this in terms of the 4 things. All right, so I'm going to talk about this in terms of the 4 points, and I'm going to use it in the steps as well. So the first thing you need to do, you need to write the cubic equation in standard form. Okay, so you have to write it in standard form. And like, as you know, the standard form ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d is equal to 0. So you have to write it in standard form. Okay, so that's the first thing to do. Now, number 2, the first thing I talked about is that you need to know the stationary point. So what you have to do is that you then have to find the stationary point. Okay, now you have to find the stationary point, and at this point, the y over the x, remember I told you a stationary point, the first derivative is equal to 0. So you have to do this using all the rules I've discussed before, okay? So using the previously discussed rules. So I'm not going to talk about this. I will just go straight and solve, okay? Because I talked about how to solve this before. So you find the stationary point using the previously discussed rules, okay? Now, in this case, there are two possible answers you can get, okay? It's possible that you can get one stationary point, okay, after solving, okay? Or it's possible that you can get what? Two stationary points, okay? So when you follow the steps I've aligned in finding stationary points, okay? When the y over the x equal to 0, when you follow all the steps, there are two possible answers you can get. You can get one stationary point, or you can get two stationary points. So you have to keep that information. It's very key because step 2 will determine what we're going to talk about in step 3. Now, number 3 now, we need to talk about the shape. So after you found the stationary point, the next thing is to determine the shape. Okay, to determine the shape of the graph. Okay, so the first thing we talked about, we found the stationary point. Now we're going to talk about the shape. All right, so there are two things to keep in mind. If from step 2, the answer, you only got one stationary point, all right? If from step 2, you only had one stationary point. Now, what you need to look out for now will be what was the value of what? A. You see the A? The coefficient of x cubed. You need to go and have a look at it. Now, if you go there and you found out that the A you have is going to be greater than 0, and it's also possible that the A could be less than 0. So that means the A value here could be greater than 0. It could be less than 0. So when you solved, you got one stationary point. You go and check the A. If the A is greater than 0, that means you're going to have an increasing function. So that means the graph is going to look like this. You'll be expecting the graph to look like this. Can you see? It's an increase, what we call an increasing what? Function. But if you go and you check and your A is less than what? 0. So that means the A value you have here is less than 0. What you will notice is that the graph, the shape of the graph you'll be expecting will be a decreasing function. So you look like this. It's going to be what? Decreasing. So that means you'll be expecting for an increasing, it's going to go all the way up. For a decreasing, you'll be expecting it to come all the way down. All right? So that is it. But if, for instance, you solve in step 2 and you have two stationary points, all right? In step 2, you have two stationary points. So that means you have two stationary points. When you solve in step 2, you go back and check the value of A. Now, if A, get this like this, yep. So if A is greater than 0, okay, what you will notice is that the graph is going to look like this. So you'll be expecting the graph is going to increase, come down, decrease, and go up. Let me draw it a little bit better. So it's going to be increasing to decrease and increase. Are you seeing it? So as you can see, in the first one, we only had one stationary point. One stationary point. Are you seeing it? But in this case, you're having two stationary points here. But the difference here is that the graph you're going to have is going to what? Increase, decrease. Let me write this way. So the graph you're going to have will increase. After increasing, it will now what? Decrease. So you see, it's increasing, decrease, then increase. Good. So 2 stationary points. But when you notice now, when you go back to the A and you notice that your A is less than 0, it's going to be the opposite. What you will notice is that the graph will first decrease, increase, and decrease. So you notice that it's going to have the same thing. The stationary points, we're going to have 2 stationary points here. But the difference here is that the graph will first what? Decrease, increase, then what? Decrease. Okay? So that is why it's very important and very important that you calculate the stationary coordinates or the points correctly. So because the stationary point is going to determine other things as well. So if you have one stationary point, you need to go and check. Is the A greater than 0? If the A is greater than 0, so that means the graph is going to be an increasing function. If it's less than 0, it's going to be a decreasing function. So you have 2 stationary points. Okay, you go and check the A. If the A is greater than 0, it's going to be an increase, decrease, and increase graph. But if it's less than 0, it's going to be a decrease, increase, and decrease graph. Okay, so that will be that for that. All right, so let's go to step 4 now. Okay, step 4. So we've done step 1. Step 1 is that we write the cubic equation in standard form. We found the stationary point, we find the shape. So the next one is to find the x-intercept. Okay, so step 4 is that you have to then find the x-intercept. Okay, and remember I told you at x-intercept, y is equal to 0. So I'm not going to talk about how to find it. We've discussed it. So at this point, you equate the cubic function to be equal to 0. And then technically what you then have to do, you then have to factorize. So you then apply the, you solve for x, or solve for x using any of the factorization technique. So I've already explained the factorization methods, okay? We talked about 4 of them, how to factorize cubic equations. So you have to make sure you understood how to factorize. So it's very important you understand that before you come to this point. Then number 5, after finding the x-intercept, then the next thing is to find a y-intercept, okay? So you have to then find the y-intercept. And like I told you, when is y-intercept, x is equal to 0. So the same thing, you use all the previously discussed steps. I've talked about how to find the y-intercept. Basically, anywhere you see x, you put 0, okay? So use all the previously discussed steps, or let's say use the previously discussed steps or rules. So I've discussed this earlier, all right? So just go back, check my playlist on how to find y-intercept. Then after you're done with this, step 6 is then what? You then sketch the graph, okay? So always remember that if this is only applied to sketching, how do you plot the graph is different, totally different from sketching a graph, okay? So let's quickly get to it. So we found the x-intercept, all right? Then you find the y-intercept, then you sketch the graph. So let's go straight. Let's assume that we have this example here. And we were told that you were told to, number 1, you were told to sketch the graph, okay? So to sketch the graph, let's say we have, let's make it interesting. Let's put it in a factorized form, x minus 2, x plus 3, and x minus 1. We're told to sketch this graph. Now, what do? The first step, step 1. Okay, so let's go. So what's the first thing to do? Step 1, you have to write it in standard form. So ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d. So in order to do this, that means we need to open the brackets. So x minus 2 x plus 3, and x minus 1. So I'm going to open these two brackets first, then I'll now open the third one. So what I'm going to do is going to be x times x will give me x squared, x times 3 will give me 3x, minus 2 times x minus 2x, minus 2 times 3 will give me minus what? 6. All this multiplied by x minus 1. So we simplify this bracket. It's going to give us x squared plus 3x minus 2x will give us x minus 6, x minus 6, and x minus 1. All right, so the next one, we're going to open this bracket again. So we're going to go x squared times x is going to give us x cubed. X squared times minus 1 will give us minus x squared. Okay? So the next one we're going to have will be x times x will give you what? X squared. X times minus 1, okay, will give you minus x. Then minus x times 6 will give you minus 6. Minus 6 times minus 1 will give you plus, sorry, this minus 6 times x will give you minus 6x, okay? Will give you minus 6x. Then minus 6 times minus 1 will give you plus 6. Then you collect like terms, okay? So we're going to collect like terms now. So in this case, we have minus x squared plus x squared is going to give us 0. So it's going to be x cubed. Minus x minus 6x will give us minus 7x plus 6. So that means the graph we're having is y is equal to x cubed minus 7x plus 6. So this is the cubic what? Cubic function. All right. Then number 2. We then have to find the stationary point. So I've discussed how to find the stationary point earlier. So we're going to just go straight to it and solve it. So for stationary point, I told you stationary point, the y dx is equal to 0, right? So we have y is equal to x cubed minus 7x plus 6. Now, but we know that we need to first find the derivative for this, the first derivative. Then the y over the x will give you 3x squared minus what? 7x. But we know that our stationary point, okay, we know that the y over dx must be equal to what? 0. So our stationary point, so that means we're going to have 3x squared minus 7x will be equal to what? 0. All right? So remember, we want to factorize here, so that 2 ways of doing this. You can decide to either you want to use common factors method if you want to, or you want to use quadratic formula, or you want to find for the value of x and that. All right? So, oh, I think I made a mistake here. So when you differentiate this, it's 3x squared minus 7. So it's not 7x. All right? So this will give you minus 7. All right? So this will be minus 7 is equal to 0. So when you differentiate, 3x squared minus 7 will be equal to 0. Yes. So you can use different methods to solve this. You can decide to use the formula method. So if you want to use the formula method, you need to identify the A, B, and C. If you want to use the, you can also use the trinomials when A is not equal to 1 here, but it's going to be a little bit cumbersome. But or you can just do is that you can get the common factors to solve for x, or you just go straight to solve for x. That I think solving for x in this case will be easy because we have the b is equal to 0. So please, if you've not reviewed my videos on factorizing quadratic equations, this will be a good time for you to go back and have a look on how to factorize. So I'm going to take 7 to the other side, and that'll give me 3x squared is equal to 7. Okay, then I'll divide both sides by what? 3. We're going to have x squared is going to be 7 over 3. All right, then the next one is x. So to remove this, I'm going to square root both sides to remove this. But remember, square root is plus or minus. So we're going to have this, we'll cancel this out. So we're going to have x is going to be equal to square root plus or minus 7 over 3. So therefore, x will be either equal to square root of 7 over 3, or minus square root of what? 7 over 3. So remember it's plus or minus. Is that plus 7 over square root of 7 over 3 or minus square root of 7 over 3? And now when you press your calculator for this, it should give you 1.53, or this is going to be minus 1.53. Now remember, we are finding what? Stationary point. So remember, we're finding stationary points. So a stationary point is going to have both an x and a y coordinate. So we need to then find a y coordinate for each of these x values. So the first thing we're going to do is that we then have to find y when x is equal to, x is equal to 1.53. I remember in the video of stationary point, I told you then you have to substitute this x into the original y to get the corresponding y for that. So then the y will now become 1.53 cubed minus 7, 1.53 plus 6. And this will give you, if you press the calculator, that should give you minus 1.13. So that means the coordinate now is going to be, when x is 1.53, y is minus 1.13. So this is the first coordinate. Then we need to get the second one. Then what you then have to do is then y at x is equal to minus 1.53. Okay? You do the same thing, then y is going to be equal to minus 1.53 cubed minus 7 minus 1.53 plus 6. All right? And the answer you're going to get, so this is 3. Okay? So when you do that, you're going to get 13.13. So that means you have 13.13. Then we can now say the other coordinates you're going to have will be when x is minus 1.53, y is 13.13. So you're having two coordinate points now. So that means we can now say the stationary points we have will be 1.53. Okay? We have two stationary points. We have 1.53 and minus 1.3. And we also have minus 1.53 and 13. So therefore, there are what? 2, okay? It's very key. There are 2 stationary what? Points. Okay, so now from here, we can see that there are 2 stationary points. So now let's go to step 3, all right? So let's go to step 3. Now we found the stationary points. There are 2 stationary points. So step 3 now. Now step 3, we then have to now determine the shape, okay? Now, we have 2 stationary points. So we're going to focus on this part of the step 3. Now, there are 2 things. Is that a is greater than 0 or a is less than 0? So let's go back. Now, the a we have, our a in this equation is x cubed minus 7x plus c. So that means the a is equal to 1. Okay? So because a is equal to 1, that means the a is greater than what? 0. And a is greater than 0, and there are what? Also, we know that from step 2, that there are 2 stationary points. And there are what? So a is greater than 0, and there are what? 2 stationary points. So we now know that there are 2 stationary points, and x and a is greater than 0. So let's go back. So let's see. So there are 2 stationary points. A is greater than 0. So we're going to expect the graph to look like this. So it's going to be increase, decrease, and increase. So we'll be expecting the graph that we're going to draw should look like this. All right. So we're done with that. The next step. So let's go to step 4. Okay. So step 4. We need to find the x-intercept, all right? We need to find the x-intercept. Now, in this case, x-intercept, what happens at x-intercept? Y is equal to 0. So we already have x cubed minus 7x plus 6. So we have y is equal to x cubed minus 7x plus 6. Now, that means x cubed minus 7x plus 6 So at x-intercept, y is equal to 0, right? Now, so that means we'll have x cubed minus 7x plus 6 is equal to 0. Then we have to factorize this now. But in this example, we're already given it in the already factorized form already, so we don't need to stress. It was given to us already as x minus 2, x plus 3, x minus 1. So we just put it here. It'll be x minus 2, x plus 3, and x minus 1 is equal to 0. Now, in this example I gave you, it's easy and straight to the point because the question has already been factorized, all right? In some example, you will not get this factorized form, and you have to factorize it yourself. So you have to know how to factorize cubic functions, all right? So please, you need to know how to factorize, all right? So that means for this now, we can now say we then have to equate each of them to be equal to 0. So x minus 2 is equal to 0. X plus 3 is equal to 0, and x minus 1 is equal to 0. So we have x is equal to 2, and this is going to give us minus 3, and this is going to give us 1, all right? So we can put it in the x-intercept form. So that means x is 2, y is 0. X is what? Minus 3, y is 0. And x is what? 1, y is what? 0. Then the next one, we then go to step 5. Step 5, what is step 5? Step 5, we need to now what? Find the y-intercept. We need to find the y-intercept. So what do? At y-intercept, remember, if you check the video, at y-intercept, x is equal to what? 0. So at y-intercept, x is equal to 0. So we have y is equal to x cubed minus 7x plus 6. So anywhere you see x, you put 0. So y is going to become 0 cubed minus 7, 0 plus 6. Okay? And this will now give you y to be equal to 6. So that means we can now put this in the y-intercept form. So that means when x is 0, y is what? 6. So then that is that for that. So that means we found the y-intercept. We found the x-intercepts as well. Okay, we found the x-intercepts. So these are all the x-intercepts. I'll put the arrows the other way. So each of these are the x-intercepts. We found that already. All right. We also found the stationary points. Then we can easily now go to step 6. Step 6 wants us to what? Sketch the graph. So step 6, we now have to what? Sketch. Okay, we're going to sketch. So we're going to sketch in another different page. All right, let's sketch the graph now, okay? So we're going to have our points. All right, so let's have some lines here. Okay, let's make it like this. Yeah, you draw the line. So let's just say this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5. So this is the x-axis. And we have minus 1. This is too close. So let's say we have somewhere here. Minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. Let's say minus 4. And we have minus 5. Then let's make this as 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Let's say something there. So this is the y-axis. All right. And we have here to be minus 2, minus 4, minus 6, minus 8, something like that. Okay. So the reason why I always put numbers here, when you're drawing yours, you don't need to do it. You can just sketch the point. But the reason why I put it is that just because it's a Maths Made Easy, so that you can picture what I'm doing. The next example, I'm going to just be putting points around so that you understand. So let's go. So the first thing we're going to find out is that step one, we knew that that was the function. So the first thing we can find is so that the stationary point is at 1.53 and minus 1.3. So 1.53 and minus 1.3. So you have the stationary point 1.53 and minus 1.3. So 1.53 somewhere here, 1.3. So let's say somewhere here, okay? So this point is the point of minus 1.53 minus 1.3. So this is minus 1.53 and minus 1. I think 1.13. Yes, 1.13. Okay, then we've gotten that. Then the second stationary point we calculated was minus 1.53 and 13.13 or 13.13 minus 1.53 and 13 point, so let's say this is 13 here, 13.13. So let's say somewhere here, okay? So sketching. So we have minus 1.53, okay? And 13.13. So this is the second point. Now the next one we found is that we found the x-intercept to be 2, 0, minus 3, 0, and 1, 0. So 2, 0, so this is 2, 0 here. So this is it, 2, 0. And the next one was what? Minus 3, 0. So minus 3, 0 is going to be here. So minus 3, 0. Okay. Then the next one is we had was 1, 0. So this is 1, 0. So 1, 0 is here. So x is 1, y is 0. Good. Then the last thing we found was 0 and 6. So x is 0, y is what? 6. Okay. And we know that the graph shape has to look like this. So the graph shape has to be this way. All right, let's go. So we're going to join the points together. Are you seeing? Go all the way here. Come down there, right? So we come down here, all the way down to that. Come down here, here, up, and down. Are you seeing it? And this is the what? The graph for what we just, for the function we had of x minus 2, x plus 3, x minus 1. All right? And that is that for that. Okay, so I want you to solve this, okay? Let's see. Let's pick this exercise here, all right? I want you to solve this question. I want you to sketch the graph. Y is equal to x minus 2 squared x plus 1. All right, I want you to sketch this graph. X minus 2 squared x plus 1. So what I want you to do is that you can pause the video, try and sketch it, and then come back to have a look at it and see if you get the same graph that I did, okay? So remember, I always tell you that it's possible they can give you in a factorized form, or they can give you in the standard form and you have to factorize. So if they give you in the standard form, I've talked about how to factorize cubic equations to get to this form. So because I don't want the video to be longer than planned, too long. So what I want to do is I'll be giving you questions in the factorized form, but just always that you know it's possible to have it in the standard form and you'll be asked to what? Factorize. All right. So let's go. Step one. All right. So the first thing you have to do is that we then have to what? Write it in what? Standard form. Okay. All right. So we have to write it in standard form. So we have x minus 2 squared x plus 1. So we have to break this down. So this is the same thing as saying x minus 2, x minus 2, and x plus 1. So I'm going to open these two brackets first. So we're going to have x times x will give you x squared. X times this will give you minus 2x. Minus 2 times x will give you minus 2x. Okay, then after you do that, Then we now have minus 2 minus 2. We have minus 2 minus 2. We'll give you plus 4. Then we also have x plus 1. So this will now give you x squared minus 2 will give you minus 4x plus 4. I will now have x plus 1. All right? So the next thing, we're going to do x squared times x will now give you what? X cubed. X squared times 1 will give you plus x squared. All right? Then we now have minus 4 times x will give you minus 4x squared. Minus 4 times 1 will give you minus 4x. All right? Then the next thing, we now have 4 times x will give you plus 4x. And we have 4 times 1 will give you plus 4. And this will give you x cubed. X squared minus 4x will give you minus 3x squared. Minus 4x plus 4x will give you 0. And we now have this will now give you plus what? 4. Okay? So therefore, we can now say y, the function, is going to be x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4. All right, so that'll be that for that. Okay, that'll be that for that. Now, the next part that I want to talk about is that if you have this particular kind of questions, okay, you have this particular kind of questions. Now, like I always say, it's possible that the initial question that will be given to you will be, for instance, in this case, you might be given y is equal to x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4, and you'll be asked to sketch it. Is that okay? Now, then you have to solve it. You have to follow the factorization rules and get back to this place, because this is an important point to get the x and the y intercept. Okay? But in this video, what I'm doing is that I'm giving you in the factorized form, and then you just get this by expanding the bracket. But in some cases, you might be given this and you'll be asked to factorize to get to this point. And that was the reason in the previous videos, I talked about how to factorize cubic functions. So you can go to the playlist, look at the video, and see how do you factorize cubic functions. Good. Now, the next one is step 2. We're going to go to step 2 now. Step 2 is that we are now asked to what? Find the stationary point. So let's go. Let's find the stationary point. Step 2. Let's find the stationary point. So remember, when we talked about stationary points, I have a video on differentiation. Please, if you don't know how to find stationary point, I have all the steps there. But now I'm going to just go straight and solve it. So we are now having y is equal to x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4, okay? X cubed minus 3x squared plus 4. So now to differentiate this, what you have to do is that you need to find a dy over dx, okay? You have to first differentiate this, and this will give you 3x squared minus what? 6x, okay? Now, but you know, we talked about this, that a stationary point, okay? A stationary point, dy over dx is equal to what? 0. So that means when you get to stationary point, the first derivative is equal to 0. So that means 3x squared minus 6x is equal to 0. Now, at this point, you then have to factorize. Now, you can use different methods. I showed you how to use the common factors to factorize. I showed you how to use formula method as well, the quadratic formula to factorize. And I also showed you how to use trinomials when a is not equal to 1. So any of these three should work here. But the easier one here, or the easiest that you can use, will be the common factors. So let's take out the common factors between this. We have 3x, and you have x minus what? 2 is equal to 0. So that means 3x is equal to 0, or x minus 2 is equal to 0. So to get x, you divide both sides by 3. So therefore, x is equal to 0, or you take x to the other side. Take minus 2 to the other side, and that will give you x to be equal to what? 2. But remember, as I explained to you earlier, that when you're talking about stationary points, you need to talk about both the x and the y. All right. So we've gotten the x, right? So now we need to get the y, because for stationary point, you need to have both the x and y. All right. So we'll start with the first one. When x, so what is y? So then y, when x is equal to 0. So what will be the corresponding value for y when x is equal to 0? So like I explained in the video, for stationary points, you then substitute x into the original equation to get y. So y will be equal to 0 cubed minus 3, 0 squared plus 4. Then y will be equal to what? 4. All right. Then we can now get the stationary point is when x is 0, y is what? 4. All right. So we've got the first what? Stationary what? Point. Now we now get the second stationary point. Then we now have to find y when x is equal to what? 2. The same thing, y will be equal to 2 cubed minus 3, 2 squared plus 4. Then when you press your calculator for that, this is 8, that is will give you 0. Then y will be equal to what? 0. So that means we can say that the next stationary point is that when x is 2, y is what? 0. Okay, and that is that. Good. So we've gotten two stationary points here. So that means for this equation or this graph function or the cubic function, there are two stationary points. Now we're going to go to the next step, which is step 3. All right, let's go to step 3. So what happens in step 3? We then have to then what? Determine the value of a first. Okay, so let us check. For this one, the a we had was what? 1. Are you seeing it? So here, in this case, a is 1. So because the a we are having here, in this case here, all right? So that means a is what? Greater than 0. So the same thing, we have step 3, a is greater than 0, and we also have two stationary what? Stationary points. So the two things we have, a is greater than 0, and we have two stationary points. So let's go to the rules. So a is greater than 0 and two stationary points. It's going to be an increase, decrease, and increase graph. It's going to look like this. So that means the graph we should be expecting for this is going to look this way. Now, step 4. Okay. The next thing we then have to find is the what? The x and y intercept. So let's see step 4. Which intercept are we finding? The x-intercept. So we're going to find the x-intercept for this. So we have y is equal to, was it x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4. So we have x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4. All right, so I showed you how to factorize, okay? But remember, when you factorize at y equals to 0, I showed you how to factorize, and I showed you 4 methods to do that. But in this question, they've already factorized it already for you in the beginning. If you remember, it was x minus 2 squared and x plus 1. So it's x minus 2 squared x plus 1. All right. So what I can advise is that you can use the factorization method we've talked about, play around with it, and see if you get exactly the same thing. So I've shown you how to factorize already. Okay. So you can go around, take the x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4, try and factorize it on your own, follow all the steps I explained and I highlighted, then see if you're going to get the x minus 2 squared x plus 1. So basically, so what you've done and got the answer, so it's going to become x minus 2 is equal to 0, and x plus 1 is equal to 0. So we have x is equal to 2, and x will be equal to minus 1. And you can put it in the intercept form. So x is what? 2, y is what? Put it in brackets first. So x is 2 and y is 0. So this is the first one. Then we also have x is -1 and y is 0. Okay, so now at this stage, we found the x-intercepts, the two x-intercepts, all right? And at this stage as well, we found what? The two stationary points. Now the next thing is that we want to then find the step 5, which is the what? A y-intercept. So step 5, we need to find a y-intercept when x is equal to 0. So y-intercept, so we need to find the y-intercept. So we know y is equal to x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4. But at y-intercepts, x is equal to 0, okay? So x is equal to 0 at this point. So anywhere you see x, you put 0. So you have y will be equal to 0 cubed minus 3, 0 squared plus 4. Then what you now get, you now have your y to be equal to what? 4. And when you want to put it in the y-intercept form, it's going to be x is 0, y is what? 4. And then this is the what? The y-intercept. Then when you're done with that, we need to go to step 6. And step 6 is what? Sketching the graph. So we're going to go and sketch the graph now. We're going to sketch the graph now. So step 6, we then have to what? Sketch the graph. So I'm going to do this in a new page so that it will be easy for you to see. All right, so let's sketch the graph here. Okay, so let's sketch it. So you can have the graph, have this, right? So now in the first example, I showed you all the points, okay? So the reason why I'm going to break it and try to show the points so that it'll be easy for those that are not very good at sketching to understand. But you don't really need to show all the scales. You can just show the points itself, all right? But because some of us are not really good at sketching, it's your first time. So I'm going to be showing points here to help you to understand, all right? But you don't really need to do this, all right? You can just go straight and write a point. So I have minus 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I can have maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 as well up here. All right, so I can have -1, -2, -3, -4. Okay, so this is the y-axis, and this is the what? The x-axis. All right, so let's make it interesting now. So let's start. Step 1, we have the stationary points. The first one is at 0 and 4 and 2 and 0. So x is 0, y is 4. Look at the first one. X is 0, y is 4. So we have it here. Let me see if I can use black pen for contrast. So x is 0, y is 4. So that means the point we're having here, x is 0, y is 4. Are you seeing it? The next one we have 2 and 0. So x is 2, y is 0. So x is 2 here, x is 2, y is 0. So we have 2 and 0. Are you seeing it? We're done. So let's go to the next one. We're done with stationary points. The next one is greater than 0. So we're expecting the graph to look like this. Okay, so at the end of the graph, we're expecting the graph to look like this. The next one is we're finding the x-intercept. So the first one is 2 and 0. So interestingly, we already have it already, 2 and 0. Good, sorted. Then the next one is we have -1 and 0. So x is -1, y is 0. So x is -1, y is 0. So it's going to be this point here. We have -1 and 0. Okay? Then the next one, the y-intercept. The y-intercept is 0 and 4. So we have it as 0 and what? 4. All right, so let's draw it. So as we know, the shape must be like this. So that means the graph is going to look like this. Let me use blue for this. So the graph is going to look like this. Like this. Coming down. Like this. It has to be a smooth curve coming down here and up. And this is how the graph will look like. All right. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just take one more example for exercise for you to try. Okay, I'll just take one more for you to try. Then I will now do that, and that will be the last one for this video. So let's assume that you were told that you were asked to sketch y is equal to, let's say we have minus x plus 1 squared and x minus 2. All right. So like I said, you can pause the video and try as much as possible to sketch it. And when you're done sketching, you can come back and press the play button and see if you get exactly the same thing I got. All right. All right. So assuming you've solved it and you've you've tried solving it yourself and you have your sketch now and you want to check with what I did. So let's go, let's start. So we have step 1. So we have y is equal to minus x plus 1 squared, x minus 2, okay? So in order to make it easier, I'm going to do it this way. So we're going to have minus, okay? We have x plus 1 squared, x minus 2, so that the minus is not going to confuse us. Is that okay? Then I'll open the bracket inside. So we have x plus 1, so that x plus 1, x plus 1. Then we have x minus 2. Keep the minus outside. So we'll open this first 2 first. So we're going to have x times x will give us x squared. X times 1 will give us x. 1 times x will give us x. 1 times 1 will give us 1. We close the bracket, x minus 2. Still the minus outside, we have x squared plus 2x, that's x plus x, plus 1, and we have x minus 2. Okay? Then the next one, I'm going to open the brackets now. So we have minus into bracket, x times x squared will give you x cubed. Are you seeing it? X squared times minus 2 will give us minus 2x squared. Plus 2x times this is going to give us plus 2x squared. Plus 2x times this, plus 2x times minus 2 will give us minus 4x. 1 times x will give us, 1 times x will give us x. And 1 times minus 2 will give us minus 2. Are you seeing it? And this is going to give us minus into bracket, x cubed. Now, minus 2x squared plus 2x squared, this will cancel out and give you 0. Minus 4x plus x will give you minus 3x, then minus 2. We're not done yet. So remember, we have a minus outside. Then we'll use the minus to open the bracket. Then do not become minus times x cubed will give you minus x cubed. Minus times 3x will give you plus what? 3x. Minus times minus 2 will give you plus what? 2. Are you seeing it? So therefore, we can now say y is equal to minus x cubed plus 3x plus 2. So like I said, in some questions, they could ask you sketch minus x cubed plus 3x plus 2, all right? So from this point, you then have to convert it to the factorized form. And I've shown you the 4 steps on how to do that. But in this case, they gave you in the factorized form, and you just need to find what? The expanded form. Good. Now let's go to step 2. So step 2 is that we then have to find the stationary point. That is the y over dx is equal to 0. All right, so let's do that. So step 2, stationary point, we have it as y is equal to minus, so step 2, we have it as y is equal to minus x cubed plus 3x plus 2 minus x cubed plus 3x plus 2. So to find the stationary point, we need to first find the first derivative. So the y over dx is going to give us what? Minus 3x squared plus what? 3. Okay? But we know our stationary point, okay? Our stationary point, we know that the y over dx is equal to what? It's equal to 0. So that means all this minus 3x squared plus 3 must be equal to what? 0. So we have a quadratic equation now. We have minus 3x squared plus 3 is equal to 0. So like I told you, I showed you the different ways to solve for x or solve quadratic equation. We use complete the square method, factorization, and common factors. And we talked about so many methods as well. Now, but for this one, what are we going to do? So let's solve this. So I'm going to take my plus 3 to the other side. So it's going to give me minus 3x squared will be equal to minus 3. Then I divide both sides by minus 3. And then x squared is going to be equal to what? 1. Then to remove this, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So remember, the square root means plus or minus. So this will cancel that. Okay? So x is going to be equal to square root of plus or minus of what? 1. All right? So that means x will be equal to the positive square root of 1 or a negative square root of 1. And that will give you 1 or what? Minus 1. Good. So that is the x values. X is equal to 1 or minus 1. Now, the next thing is that we're talking about stationary points, and stationary points must have both an x and a y, all right? So we need to find a y for this. So then, what will be the y when x is equal to 1? So if you watch the video on how to find stationary points, I told you that you have to substitute x into the original equation. So we have y will be equal to minus 1 cubed plus 3, 1 plus 2. Then y will be equal to, when you press all this in your calculator, this is going to give you 4. So the first stationary point we're having is going to be 1 and what? 4. And that will be that for that. So this is the first stationary point we have. So we're going to have the stationary point as 1 and 4. Okay? Now the next one is that we're going to look for then what will be y at x to be equal to minus 1. Does that make sense? So the same thing, you have y, you substitute minus 1 into this. So anywhere you see x, you put minus 1 plus 2. Then your y, you're gonna get y to be equal to 0. Okay, so now we can now say now we found the stationary point when x is minus 1, y is what? 0. Okay, and that will be the second what? Stationary what? Stationary point. So that means from this now we can now say that this has 2 stationary points. So now we go to the next step. We'll go to step 3. So for step 3, okay, we need to now go to step 3. So what is step 3? Step 3 is that we have to determine the shape. So we need to find what A is. So let's go back to the graph, the function that we have. So the function we have A minus x cubed plus 3x plus 2. That means A is going to be equal to minus 1. Are you seeing it? So A is equal to minus 1. So that means we're expecting a kind of increase function. So A is equal to minus 1, which implies that A is going to be less than what? A is less than 0. So that means for step 3, we can say A is less than 0, and we have what? 2 stationary what? We have 2 stationary points. Because in step 2, we have 2 stationary points, and we now know that A is less than 0 because the A we had in the function here is minus 1. So let's go back and see. So we have in this example, so A is less than 0, 2 stationary points. So we're going to be expecting a decreasing and an increasing decrease function or a graph. So that means for this case, we should be expecting the graph to look like this. So when we're done solving, we need to have the graph to look like that. All right, so let's go to step 4. So we're done with that. Step 4 is to find the x-intercept, okay? So we know that at x-intercept, the y is equal to what? At x-intercept, y is equal to 0. So that means the y here is 0. So we're going to be, we have y is equal to minus x cubed plus 3x plus 2 minus x cubed plus 3x plus 2. So at this case here, y is equal to 0. So we have minus x cubed plus 3x plus 2 is equal to 0. So they want you to factorize. So that means they want you to factorize, and I showed you how to factorize already. And because the question already giving you the factorized form here, I'm going to just write it down. But remember, I told you in some cases, you might not be given it in factorized form. Then you have to apply any of the four methods I taught you on how to factorize cubic function. If you don't know how to factorize cubic function, please go to look at the previous videos, or you can just search factorizing cubic function or graphs, and you will just see the videos and you can watch it. And I talked about 4 different methods on how to do it. Is that okay? So you need to have a look at that. So now we already know this. After you factorize, this should be your answer. Minus x plus 1 squared, x minus 2. So minus x plus 1 squared, x minus 2. All right? So if you factorize this, but this is equal to what? 0. So that means in order to do this, you're going to have x plus 1 is equal to 0, and x minus 2 is equal to what? 0. So therefore, you have x will be equal to minus 1, and x will be equal to 2. Then to write it in the x-intercept form, so that means you have x is minus 1 and y is 0, and x is 2, y is 0. So with that, then, we can now say that we found the x-intercept. So we're expecting this to have 2 x-intercepts in this graph. Then step 5. Okay, step 5, we need to then find the y-intercept. So as y-intercept, x is equal to what? 0. So anywhere you see the x, okay, you're going to put 0. So you have the function like this. So anywhere you see x, you put 0. So it's going to become y will be equal to minus 0 cubed plus 3, 0 plus what? 2. And therefore, y will be equal to what? 2. So therefore, to put it in the y-intercept form, so x is 0, y is what? 2. So this is the y-intercept. Okay, and that will give you the y-intercept. All right, so we've done that. So the step 6, which you know already, step 6 is to what? Is to sketch it. All right, so I'm going to sketch this in another new page so that it will be easy for you to understand. All right, so let's sketch this. So like I said, I'm going to just write scales down so that it will be easier for those to understand. But usually when you're sketching, you don't need to write down the scales. Is that okay? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the positive x, and negative x, minus 1, minus 2. Oh, let me do this to be bigger here. So let me say here's minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, minus 4. Okay. Then we have here to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the positive y. And here we have minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, minus 4. Okay. So let's draw the graph for this. So we'll start with the first one. Step 1, okay. Step 2, we have the point 1 and 4. X is 1, y is 4. So x is 1, y is 4. Okay, so this point here is 1 and 4. Okay, the next one, the next point, x is minus 1, y is 0. So x is minus 1, y is 0. So x is minus 1, y is 0. So we have minus 1, y is what? 0. Good. Then the next one we have, we're done with the 2 points for stationary points. Then the next one we're going to have is the x-intercept. Minus 1 and 0, interesting. We already have the point already. As you can see, it's an x-intercept. And we have 2 and 0. So we have 2 and 0. at this point here. All right. Then the y-intercept, we have 0 and 2. So 0 and 2. So this is 2 and 0, okay? X is 2, y is 0. Then next one is 0 and 2. We have it here. So we have 0, x is 0, y is 2. All right. So let's draw the graph for this. So we're going to have, so because we know that the shape of the graph from step 3 must be this way, okay? We're expecting the shape to be like this. So we're expecting the shape to be like this. So the only way it's going to be is going to look like this. Come all the way here, pass through the x-intercept, come down there, and this is the graph you will have. So you can draw it all the way down and all the way up, okay? And that will be the graph for that. All right, and that will bring us to the end of how to sketch cubic graphs, okay? The next one I'll be going straight into now will be how do we sketch rational functions. And I'm going to talk about each and every one of them as well so that you will be very, very conversant with it. So like I always say, if you have any questions, please feel free to send me a message. And if there's a particular topic you're not comfortable with, you can send me an email and I'll try to make a video about it as well. All right, thank you very much. And I will see you soon. And see you in the next video where we talk about sketching of a graph. All right, see you soon.